Hi, everybody. I hope you guys are all doing well. One moment, I have to check one thing. I got kicked off of the internet right before this went live, and I had to recalibrate all my settings really super quickly. So, apologies for that. Looks like we're okay. So, what we're here today to do is to have a little pandemic makeover for the Thanksgiving STEM challenges. So, I'm going to go through 5 different challenges and I'm going to give you basically the little modifications that you can make so that you can still do STEM challenges with social distancing and with distance learning without breaking the bank materials wise and without even needing very much. And so the same thing will be true for your kids who are at home who might be doing distance learning. You certainly can't expect them to have a ton of different materials. So we want to make sure that we create challenges and materials in a way that it can be really accessible to most everybody. So I do want to go through a couple of things. Let me see my notes for a second. Generally, what I do for the Thanksgiving challenges is I use it as a way to go through kind of the basic needs of people through the eyes of either the Wampanoag or the Pilgrims or both. And so, what we do is we do a water transportation challenge, shelter building, gathering food, organized agriculture, and then the way that, you know, civilizations sort of come together when people have met their basic needs, then there's a little bit of time for recreation. And so I have a challenge that's just for fun. And I usually go in a certain order based on that. But what I'm going to do this year is a little bit different. Knowing that we have the pandemic challenges, I'm going to go in the order of the challenges I would be most likely to do in this year, as opposed to coming from the framework of thinking we're going to do all 5, because there's probably not time for that. So just to give you that as a sort of a little preview or a little explanation. I do want to also tell you that that little bit.ly link that's scrolling along the bottom, that's sort of like the hub blog post page where each of these 5 challenges has its own full video walkthrough. Now, those videos were made in a year, in mind, thinking that it would be a normal year. So keep that in mind. That's what we're doing here today, is sort of like adding to that and making the modifications. But if you want to know, extensions, ways to connect cross-curricular connections for your standards in ELA, maybe just beyond STEM. So those will be in there as well. So if you want to know more about a challenge, you see one that you like, check out that scrolling bit.ly link below, and you can see all of the full video walkthroughs. And with that, I think what makes the most sense is I'm going to show you really quickly. There's like a 30-second video that kind of gives you a preview of what all the challenges look like. So I'm going to show you that one first. I think I have to take the banner off. Let me take both banners off. Okay, I'm going to leave this one down there that's scrolling, and then I will do the quick 30-second thing, and then we'll jump right in with Pumpkin Picker, which is the first challenge that I think I would do if you only have a little bit of time. So here's the overview of all the challenges, and I'll come right back. Oh, I think I clicked off of it. That's all right. You saw most of them anyway. Let's dive right in to talking about what we can do to actually make sure these challenges work this year. Okay. So the first challenge I would probably use is Pumpkin Picker. And the reason I would choose this one is you can use really simple materials. It's an easy one for students to work on by themselves. So that, if you've got a social distancing requirement or they're at home, they don't really need a partner. So it can work out well for that. I'm going to give you some material substitutions on this. And the other reason I would start with this one is because at this point in a normal school year, I would be pretty much kind of looking for something different to do besides what I call the STEM Challenge classics, which are boats, bridges, towers, catapults. At this point in the year, I've probably done all of those. I do have a boat in this series and we'll talk about it, but this is one of the reasons I would choose this one, is because it's just a little something different and it's a palate cleanser sort of in a way, right? So I might actually make this a little bit bigger for you. Okay. So for substitutions, some things that you can look at are wrapped candies for the pumpkins. You don't need those little pumpkin candies, although if you can find them, they'd be on a really good sale right now, I'm sure, because it's a week after Halloween. But you can use wrapped candies like Rolos, base 10 blocks, counting cubes, building bricks, pasta shells, and even crumpled paper. I have an image of that actually, I think on the next. There you go. So, I mean, obviously it's nice if you have orange paper you can crumple up, but thinking about kids at home, they can just rip up junk mail and they'll be all set. They don't need the pumpkin template necessarily. There is one if you know, you can make your own, or this is the template that I usually use. And you can do that however you want. You know, this is obviously, you're probably looking at it. If you do multiplication facts, you're probably already thinking, arrays. That can be a really good connection for this. I will stay out of connections because that's in the full video walkthrough. You can watch it later. Or if you have like a little mold, you can make something like that. So moving back to, I'm going to take this scroll off because the scroll is kind of making me nuts. Okay. There, I can focus better now. Hopefully that's better for you too. And then let me make this bigger. Okay, so other materials. So they're going to actually need to build something to clear the pumpkins, to pick the pumpkins and basically harvest them either as quickly as possible, as you would use a second timer or your phone to time that, or you can do it instead of that that way with a clock in as few moves as possible. So you saw like in the in the actual preview. And I think I'm going to show you I'll show you some examples here in a moment where you can see it. But like maybe it takes them 6 different moves to clear all of the pumpkins off. So they can do it that way without having to need a timer. But in order to build their pumpkin pickers, any clean trash, cardboard scraps, and then it's helpful to have something that can connect. Craft sticks are great if you can have them, but cardboard scraps will work just as well in this case. But something that can help connect pieces. So whether that's tape or pipe cleaners or twisty ties or rubber bands, one of those things will be necessary. If you can do more than one, then that's great too. I'm going to show you a couple different examples as we work through this, but let's talk about some modifications for how your students are actually working. So they can do this challenge individually. I'm always like, I always want to tell you when we do these things, please don't show your students pictures or examples like I'm showing you right now of different designs. Because what you do in that, if you might think you're helping, right, to show them examples of ones that other students have built. But what you're actually doing is you're taking the biggest part of the problem solving out of the equation for your students. So you're making it off the bat in some ways much easier and in some ways much harder, because it becomes more difficult to really look at the criteria and constraints list and consider criteria and constraints. When you see the models, students have a tendency instead to just recreate something that they saw, as opposed to really looking at the criteria and constraints list and letting their innovation take over. So don't show them pictures before they do their first build. I think it's fine in between builds 1 and 2 if you're going to do a second one, because that can be kind of a form of research, right? And to try to kind of put the best pieces of the best designs that they've seen together in different ways, perhaps. So don't show them examples, even though I'm going to show you. Okay. And then collaboration. Now, we don't want to lose this piece of STEM challenges. And usually we would have students working on a challenge like this, either in groups of 2 or 4. But that's not going to work in most instances in most areas this year. So what you can do instead is treat your collaboration as small group feedback. So maybe your students are able to give each other feedback on their designs, and whether that happens, in a classroom setting with their table buddies, which I've understood in some places that students are actually still with like kind of a partner they can work with. In some cases, it's complicated, I know, but they can also do this on like Google Slides or Flipgrid, or even, one student sort of stands up where they are and presents, and, or do it outside. But there are ways to do that, and they can give each other feedback. And another way to look at this, if you really do want them to sort of collaborate together, is each person plans and builds a design and they share that with their group. And then each person then modifies their own design to include an element from the team, or they can even choose a unifying element that they all incorporate in their second designs. I should mention that if you're watching this Monday the 9th or Tuesday the 10th, the Pumpkin Picker Challenge is actually, it's just shy of a penny from half off today and tomorrow. And that's both the print and the paperless versions are just about half off. And like I said before, you can use the pumpkin template if you end up getting the resource, or you can have them set up their own arrays. You can see on this one, they just use little X marks on the piece of paper. I actually think this would be a really good problem solving thing to do with your students is, whether it's, a set of 24 or 36 or however many it is, pumpkins, asking your students to figure out how to set them up in a way where they're equally spaced could be a challenge in itself, depending on the age of your students. So, here are just a couple other examples. I know teachers enjoy seeing what other students have built, and these came to me from teachers who actually have the resource. These are not from most of these are not from me. They're from other teachers just like you. And thank you so much, those of you who sent them to me. Nothing makes me happier than seeing student designs. And like I said earlier, if you want to know more about this challenge and the connections, the different ways you can modify it and make it harder for older students, easier for younger students, that blog post has the full video walkthrough, and this is the picture you'll look for. And then those are just the ways to contact me if you indeed decide that you want to send pictures or challenge that I would be most likely to do in a year like this is turkey transporter. And the reason for that is similar to the first one, which is that it's easy enough for students to work alone and it's easy enough to get the materials that they need. Plus, it usually ends up being sort of a zip line challenge or a parachute challenge, which again makes it a little bit different from boats, towers, bridges, catapults. So it's something a little bit different for this point in the year. This is an example of what the criteria and constraints might look like. And you can have it so that I've done this in the past where you can either do the turkey needs to be transported along a horizontal distance or a vertical distance. And that's why you usually end up with either a zip line or a parachute design. In some cases, if you have older students, maybe you want to actually have one design that works both ways. But the way that we set it up, because I don't want them just to throw the turkey across the room, that's not what I'm going for here with the challenge. So the way that we set it up is the turkey must travel the safe distance. We usually set up 2 chairs if we're doing horizontal. And the turkey must arrive safely as possible. No damage can occur to the turkey, no crumples, tears, but you can fold or cut around it. Turkey's face can't contact the ground, and you may only release the turkey, no tossing or throwing the turkey. So when we're looking at that, I think I have a little cutout here. So I usually give them a little cutout. But if you have students who are at home and you can't transmit this to them, or obviously you can't expect them necessarily have a printer or anything like that, I would literally just tell them to make a hand turkey, put it on the ad that came in the junk mail, and then that's their turkey. And then the idea is that when it's transported, it needs to arrive safely. It can't be crumpled. It can't end up so that the turkey's like facing like face down on the ground when it gets there. Okay. So that's just kind of the basics. And like I said, there's a video walkthrough. There's other ways to make it harder. This is like in a typical year, like I would probably pull together some combination of the materials that you see in this picture. For kids in the classroom, a lot of these things are things you probably do have on hand, and you could still use them effectively without needing to have them share materials and without wasting too much stuff. I'm going to tell you about the actual testing in a moment because there are some things we need to do for that as well. And then how much yarn or string you need will depend on whether you are having them like maybe drop from a stairwell, the vertical distance. Less string would be needed there, and they're more likely to make sort of a parachute material. And that's where those coffee filters come in. That can be really helpful, or paper plates. But if they're doing a vertical distance, you just need to decide how long you want them to actually be transporting this turkey. So whether that's 15 feet or a little bit less or a little bit more, that's up to you. And I usually just go and get like a big thing of twine from Dollar Tree because that's where I always shop, or maybe some yarn, a skein of yarn. If your kids are doing this at home, I wouldn't necessarily expect them to have a lot of string. So in that case, I would probably sort of lean toward pushing them toward the vertical distance because, but they need parent permission when it comes time to testing it because we don't want them climbing on chairs or climbing on furniture when they're not being supervised. So what I would recommend doing is setting it up in a way where you would suggest to your students if they're at home and they don't have string and you can't send them string, then they should be doing something from a vertical distance. And what they can do is have whoever their adult is in their life when they're testing it, the adult will just hold it up as high as they can and drop it. Now, if the adult wants to let them climb on a chair or furniture or whatever, that's up to them. But your direction to your kids who are at home is you need the adult in your life or the tallest person in your life, whoever that is. When it comes time to test it, they're going to hold it up and let it go. And maybe they'll be in a apartment complex where they actually have a stairwell or something like that. Again, you can give recommendations or ideas, but make sure you always are reiterating that their parent needs to be there to test it with them. Okay. So moving right along, one of the things that's important, I think, is having either what's not really that important. Okay, so I was going to say it's important usually to have the binder clip because the binder clip or something like it is usually what allows the turkey to sort of move or glide along the string in a horizontal test. In the past, I've used that or I've used straws. Now, I'm trying to move away from using plastic straws for environmental reasons. So, what I found really replaces them really easily is rigatoni, just the tube shaped pasta. In most instances, and certainly in this one, works just as well. And it's not using a one time use plastic. So, I didn't retake this photograph obviously in a while because there are straws in it, but I would recommend that. But even then, you don't need to have that either because if you have cardboard scraps, the students could fashion easily a loop that allows the turkey to transport. Just like in the last challenge, they're going to need some kind of connector. It's helpful to have some kind of tape. They don't need a ton, but a little bit of tape. And if you're making kits to send home, you've probably already come across this. A couple of good ideas for that if you are sending it home are those individual little dots, like yard sale sticker kind of things. Or you can also, I was going to see if I had my ruler, but I don't. Oh, I do. Or putting the tape on top of the actual ruler and sending that home. Now, I know that might not be possible. You might have already sent kits home. Another thing they can do is twisty ties. And even if you really had to, I'm thinking you could probably manage to sort of like bend foil a little bit to make that work. So here are just a couple of different examples, but just like in the last challenge, when they're creating their actual turkey transporter, that can be done on their own individually. There are a couple of different examples here, and you can see on the side what some of the testing has looked like in the past. I think this is still really manageable. You just have to set up the chairs further apart. I would definitely do the testing outside so there's room to do that. Or you can have the students test in waves where, we're going through and taking turns. Usually in this case where you see one student is standing on the chair and releasing the turkey and allowing it to move down, there's usually another student on the other end holding that string down. Now, depending on the rules where you are, that won't be something that they can do. But what you could do is tie the opposite string to the leg of the chair, have the student do that. And each student could test individually and move through sort of in groups so that they are far enough of space from each other, but it can still work. You can also do dropping things off of the stairwells as well. Just like everything else, if you do this and you have pictures, please tag me. If you want to see the full walkthrough and ways you can make this harder, easier, or connect other subject areas, it's going to be on the full walkthrough. I'll put the little thing up there again, just in case you joined later. That little scrolling link that you see on the bottom takes you to a blog post where each of these 5 challenges has its own walkthrough that has a little bit more in-depth explanation of everything. Today, what I'm trying to do is just go through and give you some quick modifications that since this year is different from most years. The next one I would be most likely to do is the shelter building challenge. And you can have the students build shelters for Wampanoag people or pilgrims or both if you want. One of the things I like to follow up with this challenge is after they've built is to actually go and research is the word I'm looking for. Research the kinds of homes. So the Wampanoag built Weetus, and how did they do that? And what was the engineering behind it? And how did they use their natural resources to create structures that protected them from the elements? And I would do that same thing with the pilgrims as well. And then if you can do a second build and have them incorporate some of the examples that they found, that can be a really cool kind of connection here for social studies. Some things you can do, you'll notice on all of these, I always tend to use really simple to find materials anyway, because I want things to be cheap. But they don't ever need all of these things. If your kids are what they really, really need, whether they're at home or they're in school, they're going to need something to stand in for the people, right? They need either Wampanoag people or pilgrims. If they are at home, they can just draw the little images. And then I guess what I usually do is, because I usually use printouts and they're about 2 or 3, I think they're about 3 inches tall, that we would put inside the structures. If they were at home and they needed to build or draw people on scratch paper, I would maybe have them, maybe say like they need to be as tall as the palm of your hand, not including your in fingers, so that you have some sort of consistency among the people that are being protected, whether your students are in class or at home, because that's probably about the right. I mean, obviously everybody's hands are a little bit different, but I try to imagine kids don't have rulers maybe at home either. So how do we help them use non-customary forms of measurement? They are going to need something to test for the rain, the wind, and or the snow. And then tape or glue is very, very helpful. It's not 100% necessary, but if they have one of those things, it will give them a little bit more options in what they're doing. Now, substitutions for kids at home or kids in your classroom, always junk mail. I'm like so excited that I finally found a use for junk mail. Cardboard scraps and tubes. And then even if they're at home and they are allowed to, or their parents can give the permission to look for bark, mulch, or branches, because that's actually going to be more in line with, the research that you're going to end up doing, right? Is using your natural resources, and thinking about the physical properties of those resources and putting them together in a way that can create shelter. One quick tip is more malleable materials equals a tougher STEM challenge for your kids, because the snow test is really a weight test to see if it can withstand the weight. And we usually use something like a water bottle to stand in for that, which is probably still a good substitution for being at home. But what I have been saying all year long this year is what you want to do is involve your students in creating solutions to these problems, not just from the STEM challenge, but the actual materials part. Since they're all at home, or some of them are at home and some of them are in class, and we don't know who has what, we would say, usually we would test with a water bottle. What if you don't have a water bottle at home? What's something that maybe weighs a similar amount, do you think, that you might be able to use? Maybe that's a sneaker. Maybe you end up putting a sneaker on top. There will be something in their home they can use. Maybe it's a shampoo bottle. There's going to be something that weighs about the same that they can use to test for snow. For wind, I would usually use a hair dryer. So if they have that at home, great. If they don't, a fan or just blowing on it. Same thing would be true in the classroom. If you can do any of those things, you might feel a little bit weird about like moving the air around in the classroom, so you can go outside, or just skip the wind test. Like if you don't want to do the wind test, don't do it. You can just do it for the snow if you want, because that's a pretty easy test and it's not messy. The rain test is always a little bit messy. Sometimes what we do is we take those little bathroom, those like little tiny like 3-ounce cups, and poke little holes in it. And it's just sort of like the little rainmaker, which you probably saw at the beginning video of this. But it's messy, right? So if you don't want to do that this year, you just want to keep things simple, then you just have them build the shelter to protect from snow, because it does snow in the Northeast. And we can just use a simple weight test. And then the same collaboration tips I'm going to say throughout all of this is have them help each other understand like what went well, what didn't go well, what might be a way to solve a problem that you had when you were trying to build your shelter, and then maybe doing some unifying elements on your rebuilds. So the extensions, as I mentioned earlier, have them do some research, focus on those natural resources and physical properties, and then incorporate some of those design elements that the Wampanoag and the Pilgrims used into their own second builds. If you want to know more on this one, go to the blog that's scrolling below, and then you can check out the full video walkthrough. If you do this challenge, please tag me. All right, moving right along. So this next one is the water transportation challenge. So this is mini Mayflower or mini Mission. So again, we're looking at the water transportation that people actually used, right? The Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people. They can choose. It doesn't even matter before they start building. Really what they're doing is they're building a boat. They're going to do the research afterward. This is my preference, right? Because I always want them to build without too many preconceived notions, because I noticed when we research first, they just replicate the picture they saw in the book or the picture they saw on the internet, and they don't create new and interesting solutions. And it just robs them, as I mentioned earlier, of the problem solving that goes into reading a criteria and constraints list and creating a design that meets those criteria and constraints, as opposed to just like, oh, this is what my teacher wants me to do, I'll make that. So I wouldn't even worry about saying like, choose to make a mini Mayflower or choose to make a mini Mission. We're making mini Mayflowers and Missions. Don't worry that they don't know, that they might not recognize the word mission yet. The research can come later. They can, same thing that they did with the shelters, they can apply what they learn in their rebuild. There is a channel, I do have a separate YouTube channel called Simple STEM from Home, where I went through actually student facing videos that were about boat building, just boat building. I didn't call it this, that you can look for some other, you can actually assign it out to your kids who are at home, and it really walks them through how do you find the materials, what materials might you have at home that work well for this, and gives them lots and lots of suggestions. So I'm not going to go into all of that and belabor it right now, but if you look up, if you search Simple STEM from Home on YouTube, you'll find there's a series, I think it's 4 videos for the boat challenges that are student facing and actually come with Google. There are some Google Slides links that you can assign out, some choice board stuff, some Google Forms as well. And then if you've already done a boat challenge this year, but you want to do this one too, try to change something up to make it novel. So whether that's the materials, you use very different materials, or if in a previous challenge you built for capacity, consider also building for like sailing speed. Like you want to actually have something that will allow the boat to sail from point A to point B. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go into it a whole lot today because I've been over boat challenges quite a few times, but check out either the blog post here or Simple STEM from Home and you will find it. All right, last challenge in this set is Corn Cultivator. And what they're doing in this challenge is they're designing one or more farming tools, and that those tools, whether it's one or a combination, need to accomplish 3 tasks. You need to till the soil, plant the seeds, and irrigate. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I noticed that this is the last one I'm going over with you. It's because it's probably the one I'm least likely to do. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It doesn't even mean that it wouldn't go well. But the reason that I wouldn't necessarily choose this one, it wouldn't be my top out of the 5, is because it's the hardest one for sure. And it requires the most materials and it's the messiest. So those things combined in a year like this, I'm not sure I would do it, but maybe you're feeling brave of spirit. And if you were going to do it and you're on your school campus, then I would recommend actually you can have them do the building part of the tools in class. They can do that individually. I've never done it individually. I've never done this particular one as individual students. So I think it could be tricky, especially with young kids, but it's not impossible. But when they come to do the testing, I would 100% do that outside on a playground, so that all of the mess is contained out there and so that they don't need a tray. Like in this case, you can see I used a tray and that's actually flour inside and then little popcorn kernels. What I would do instead is take them outside of the playground and just have them like draw out a section in the sand on the playground. And that's where they would do it so that all the mess would be left outside. Or if they're at home, have their parents take them, ask your parents if you can go out in the front yard or the backyard or find a place near the park where you can test this out. But you can see here, this is a picture of the materials that I would usually make available in a normal year. And it's a little bit more than what we would usually use. Again, I wouldn't put the straws in there anyway, because I am trying my best to not use them at all anymore. And rigatoni works just fine for this. Go to the Dollar Tree, get yourself some cheap pasta. It works really well in a number of challenges. And then, yeah, if you have any pictures or you want to check out the site, you can do that. And Carrie, I'm just now seeing your comment that says they want to copy what they see. Absolutely. This is the biggest reason why I'm just not a big fan of showing them pictures ahead of time. And it's like a natural inclination that we have as teachers, right? To show them the, here's some different ideas, but once you do that, it really shuts down their creativity. So, and more importantly, well, I don't know if I want to say more importantly, but not only does it shut down their creativity, it really, think about how much of the problem solving they're missing out on. It just kills me. Be brave enough to allow them to struggle and maybe even to fail, because that's a big thing that we need to learn. Going through school, we need to learn not only how to be successful, but how to fail and how to cope with that and how to recover from it, bounce back. So you can show them pictures in between the first attempt and the next attempt. There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. I tend not to show them pictures because usually there's examples in the class. So when we go around and we present and they get to see what the other students built, that's their, that's their pool of examples. And it's more meaningful to them because it's their peers who built them, right? If you have more questions on that or anything, please let me know. I'm always happy to talk about STEM challenges. I do it all the time. A reminder that Pumpkin Picker is just about half off today and tomorrow, both the digital and the print versions. Later, actually next week, I'm going to split up so that it's not like one big session like today's was, but I'm going to go through the winter and Christmas STEM challenges. I'm going to do one per day, Monday through Friday next week. I think I'm going to do 5 o'clock on Facebook and on YouTube as well. So we can go through some of those. There are some really great challenges that, just like this set here, don't require really that many crazy materials. Like if you've got junk mail and you've got some cardboard scraps and maybe a little bit of tape, but we can work around that too. You're going to have everything you need in order to do these challenges. And right now, kids are spending so much time on screens. We all need a little hands-on work, right? Okay, I'm going to go for now. I hope you guys are having a good week and are getting rest when you can. Have a wonderful, fabulous week. I will check in with you again next week with some more challenges. Bye for now.